You got to operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast. I'm Daniel, and on this episode, we will take a look at the USF game, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we'll also answer a few more of your questions. Saturday night, the Gators beat the South Florida Bulls 31-28. A lot closer than the game should have been, and a lot closer than predicted by many. We're going to take a look at the offense to begin. First, I'll look at some of the good that we saw in the offense, and the first good thing I can say is in the first half, the offense only had 3 full drives, and they made sure to get a scoring drive on each of them. The first drive did end in a field goal. However, the other 2 were good touchdown drives, and I really can't be upset that we scored on all 3 full drives. Of course, the 4th drive really being the one play to take the knee at the end of the first half. In the first half, AR was 7 for 9 as well, and he actually started the game 8 for 10. So that is good. Of course, we'll get into him finishing 2 for 8 in a moment. In that first half, he also had a 20-yard pass to Keon Zipper. We saw Zip start to make a little bit of a debut, ending his night with 3 receptions for 29 yards. Also, in the first half, we saw Trent Whittemore get his first reception of the season. He had 1 catch on the night for 33 yards. Again, some good things in the passing game that we saw at the beginning of the game. I know that it didn't quite end up as good as it was in the first half, but one thing to say is the first half shows what we kind of can do when we are hitting on all cylinders. Of the 2 incompletions, one of those incompletions was a good throwaway. No one was open. AR had to leave the pocket due to being rushed, throws it away when no one's open, and he's had to scramble. The other one being he threw a fade to Justin Shorter that was just out of Shorter's reach. So nothing bad, at least on that in the first half. Again, we will get to that second half as we get through the different commentary on the offense. Also, the running game was another good thing about this offense. On the night, it averaged 7.2 yards per carry. We saw the big 62-yard touchdown run by Montrell Johnson. The downside to the first half's offensive efficiency, running drives of 8 plays, including the field goal kick on the first one, 3 plays on the second drive, and the third one was decently long, 12 plays for 88 yards, is that it helped wear down the defense. However, we'll get to the defense, and part of that is on them for not getting off the field. Now, to talk about some of the bad side of the offense as it pertained to the USF game, is that one thing I noticed the first 2 drives of the second half, we switched one of our linemen. You can go on tape and see which one it was. And with that, the offense didn't do too well. In fact, that lineman got a false start on the second drive of the second half that ended up killing off that drive. There are other things we could have done better, but those, what Billy Napier would call discipline penalties, do hurt. And the game was so much different when the starter was in. I do want to take the time to say Barber at right tackle, filling in for Michael Tarquin, did do a pretty good job on the night filling in that space. And hopefully this experience that he's getting while Tarquin is out will pay dividends in the future, as not just in this season, but in future seasons, since it's a lot of experience. And as I've said on previous episodes, experience is not just something you can simulate. Another bit of my bad for the offense would be in the second half, and it kind of ties into what I just said, but for first 3 drives of the second half, we're talking the first drive only went for 6 plays before the interception, although AR did have a good 16-yard run. We will discuss that in a little bit. Then we had 3 and out, and the next drive, which ended up being AR's second interception, is actually a good drive. It was 7 plays, went for 70 yards up until that point of interception. It was a good drive. So those first 3 drives were definitely bad. If we come out on that first drive and we score a touchdown, go up 31-13, it's a completely different ball game. In part because USF will probably not lean on the run as much as they were. And at that point, our defense could pin its ears back and attack. And also, our DBs showed that if we're playing tight coverage, Bohannon wasn't going to really beat us in tight coverage. With that said, moving on to the ugly AR's second half. First play of the half, he hits Justin Shorter for a 3 or 4 yard gain on an out route. Then a few plays later, he has that 16-yard game, comes up limping. It's very evident on the broadcast feed he comes up limping. However, 2 plays later, he gets the first design run of the game, also takes a little bit of a hit there, and then it's followed by his first pick of the game. This was not a good pick. What I imagine, having watched it from the stands, watching the replay broadcast angles, is he did not see a linebacker in the robber position. What he does is he sees Pearsall coming across on the cross, throws the ball without even seeing the linebacker who has stepped in front of it as he's been watching Pearsall. And so that's something he does need to look out and definitely improve on, making sure the throw's there before throwing it. So that first one was not good. Also, the second one was not good. It wasn't the worst call to check into that one-on-one. However, the execution was terrible. I would rather be running the ball at that point. But if you're going to go one-on-one, Justin Shorter and his size is not the worst place to go. But you have to throw it in a spot where he can get it, which is not what happened. Again, I would rather see us try and pound the rock for the extra 5 yards and the touchdown there. Things that have a different bearing on the game if we do them. But that's not what happened again. So with that said, it was ugly. It was good that AR started off 7 of 9, 8 of 10. But then after going, 8 of 10 to start, going 2 of 8 the rest of the way, including these 2 big picks, is not what you want to see. If AR did what he did in the first half, which is 7 of 9, and continued that to the second half and gone 14 of 18, entirely different discussion today, but that's the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, and not the what happened. So we have to talk about here's what happened, here's the truth of it. You got to put together the full game. Another thing they did that I was not a fan of was running out of bounds for a loss on one of his scramble plays. He's scrambling out to the right side. It might have actually been a designed rollout. He's out of the tackle box. No one's open. He did have a good throwaway in the same situation earlier. However, instead of throwing it away this time, he steps out of bounds for a 3-4 yard loss. And it's counted as a sack, even though he runs out of bounds. Just things that a young quarterback needs to work on. With all that said, to grade this offense against USF, I would give Richardson at quarterback a D. I'm not going to give him an F. He did get us a few first downs with his legs, and they were longer first down runs. We're talking, I think one went for 7, 8, 9 yards. One went for 16, like we've talked about. He did have a statistically good first half. He did lead us on 3 straight scoring drives on the first half. So because of that first half, I'm not going to go lower than a D. The running backs, I've got to give them an A for this game, not just for Montrell's long 62-yard touchdown run, but the consistency. All 3 of them had a touchdown. All 3 of them had over 5 yards per carry, which is something we expected to see from USF. Going into the fourth quarter, Montrell Johnson only had 3 carries. Part of me wanted to be upset about that. Then part of me watching the film realizes, well, it's because we're still in this rotation and not necessarily the hot hand thing. However, when all your backs are running for 5+ yards per carry, I can't argue against it. Also, part of that is just the victim of circumstance for Montrell Johnson. On one of his drives, he runs the ball twice. One gets a penalty, so it's not considered a carry. And then on the next run, he takes it 62 yards to the house. So, he would probably get more carries, but when you have one carry for 62 yards and a touchdown, you're not going to get more carries on that drive. So, kind of a victim of his own success there, but good for him. Etienne, 4 straight on the game-winning touchdown drive, 4 straight carries, gets the touchdown. Last of the running backs get their touchdown of the day. Very good to see what all he's doing as a true freshman. Again, like with Barber, young guys we're seeing coming in, getting this experience, things that we hope to see pay dividends as we go forward, both in the season and in future seasons. Wide receivers, I'd give them about a B. I really can't argue with most of what I saw. It's not like we saw a bunch of drop passes. There are times that they weren't open. I do think some of that, maybe not all, does come down to some of the scheming that will be talked about later. And some of that comes to you can't catch a ball if it's not thrown where you can catch it. Examples being AR's throw or his first throw after the 16-yard sprint for first down. He throws it behind Shorter. Jordan Rogers on the broadcast kind of speculates that he believed there would be a hitch, and that's not what Shorter ran. Either way, I see Matt Hayes commented earlier about Shorter's only caught 6 of his 16 targets. Well, he's not going to catch that ball in the dirt. He's not going to catch a ball thrown a little too far for him on a fade. He's not going to catch a ball in the end zone that AR throws poorly for a pick. Yes, some of these receivers need to step up. Yes, they need to do better, but I also can't put some of these things on them when they're not getting the ball where it's possible for them to make plays. So going forward, we'll see how they do. We'll also see how the balls get to them. But for now, that's why there would be tight ends. I give them a B. Again, Zipper led the team in receptions, or tied for the lead in receptions, had a big 20-yarder. And then Sanders didn't do much in the passing game, but I did like seeing him block in the running game. One detractor I do have on that is the first throwaway that Richardson had in the first half. I mentioned, or maybe this ended up being a scramble. I think it was the throwaway. Is Sanders misses a block that allows a defender to just get right in on Richardson, and he has to leave the pocket, which of course, sometimes if you have to leave the pocket because of a rusher, blows up a passing play, and that's what happened. And so for me, despite their good blocking, plays like that did bring it down to a B. Offensive line, I got to give them an A. When you run as well as we do, when we get over 7 yards per carry, these guys in and of themselves have not given up a sack this year. There have been a few quote-unquote sacks where we've run out of bounds with the ball instead of throwing away, which I've talked about earlier. I've got to give them an A. They did what they needed to do. Overall, did great both in pass and run blocking, which you would expect when we're facing a team like South Florida. Let's hope we see them keep it up throughout the rest of the season. Moving on to the defense, definitely it was not a good night for the defense. In fact, I would put more of this game and the frustration of this game on the defense, and a lot of that coming in the first half for not shutting USF down in the first half, allowing us to get more drives when the offense was clicking well. And with more drives comes more points and possibly putting the game out of reach early, which, as I said earlier, scores change games. Allowing scores changes games. And if we get those scores earlier, maybe we see some backups and maybe we get some development. And maybe we see things that could work in a game because maybe a player isn't a great practice player, but does well when the lights are on. Sometimes we see things like that when these backups get time. And unfortunately, we didn't get that. And I put that, again, more on the defense when they allowed so much time of possession in the first half. You can't convince me that the first or second drive, they're tired yet. And I know in the first drive we got a fumble, but make no mistake, South Florida was driving if not for that good poke out by Avery Helm and Shamar James fumble recovery. Anyways, one of the big highlights for me on defense was the play of Desmond Watson, Big Des, who today had a fun tweet he put out where he talked about how some people had labeled him a waste of a scholarship. Was probably the best defensive tackle that I saw playing the other night against USF, and he's playing better with more experience. There is improvement that you can see from him. He did have that fun play where he picked up the USF running back and slammed him to the ground. Kudos to the social media team at the University of Florida, at least for the football team, who threw out an edit of that play with the legendary WWE audio of Undertaker throwing Mankind off the Hell in a Cell. It's hilarious. Look it up on Facebook if you have not had a chance. Also, another highlight was Jalen Kimber, who, although he gave up the 55-yard touchdown pass last week in good coverage, this week comes back, has a messed up hand, decides to play anyways, decides not to get surgery, and focuses in, gets the pick, and takes it back for a touchdown. The first pick six that we've seen in a few years. So that was good to see. Like I've said, when we play tight coverage, we really limit what opposing offenses can do. And when we play tight coverage, it's going to open up time for the D-line to get to the quarterback. With that said, USF's quarterback, Gary Bohannon, is known more as a runner than a passer, but he did lead Baylor to the Big 12 title last season. Some of the bad that I saw from this defense outside of a lot of what we saw would be the soft coverage we would play at times. Our soft coverage gave up some first downs, some good yards on that last drive when they're going to get a field goal, as well as a few other easy receptions throughout the night. The ugly definitely was this defense's inability to stop USF without a turnover throughout most of the night. Of course, what I'm talking about is allowing drives of 8, 10, 12 plays throughout the first and second half. If we didn't get, that fumble or the 2 picks, it's a completely different game. Not stopping the USF run game is, of course, ugly. I wonder how much of that was lack of scheme and adjustments, although at times it looked like we had 2 defensive tackles in there, or we had Watson playing defensive end in the 3-3 scheme. I think it's more of we went to 2 defensive tackles for an adjustment, but I'm not quite sure. With that said, possibly the ugliest play that we saw was allowing USF to convert on that 4th and 1 early on in the game. If we stop them there, we have a short field. Once again, this is a moment that we could have changed the game for us, but we didn't. I'm not sure who to blame really for this is. I'm leaning towards Rylan Powell did not hold the edge, crashes in. I know he does that from the edge for sure. He crashes and doesn't hold the edge, which may have stopped the run. But also Trey Dean, at least before the play, is on the outside with him. And then right before the snap, Trey Dean runs over to about the A gap, which was kind of confusing. So when he does that right before snap, I don't know if that was part of the design of the play call or something he did on his own. The answer to that question tells us 2 entirely different things. Obviously, if it was on his own, bad play, bad decision by him. However, if it were something he was coached to do as part of the play call, I can't really blame him. And I've got to wonder why our defensive coordinator would only leave an outside linebacker / buck jack position player for that outside, because if he gets beat, the play's going to be a long play, which is what ended up happening. As far as grading the defense, I would give the defensive line a B. Most of what I saw, they did what they had to do on the line. Unfortunately, there wasn't much helping out behind them. One example is the first touchdown run by USF. Gervon Dexter is being double or triple teamed. And when you're having someone have 2-3 guys on you, someone on the back end should be unblocked to come in and make the tackle, and that did not happen. Going to the linebackers, I'm giving this group a D. Sure, we got Shamar James with that fumble recovery, and I know Scooby Williams, Shamar James are freshmen, and you got Amari Burney back there, who's an experienced senior. But when it's the running game, I've got to knock our linebackers down. I don't like doing it, but this is one of those things where I'm hoping our linebackers, being two freshmen, I know it's not pretty to look at this game. I know they didn't really stop the run, as well as Burney not doing that great with run stopping when he's in there, and also probably not communicating as well as Ventrell Miller about setting up the D line where they needed to be and other communications. These are things I'm hoping are learning moments since they are freshmen, time to grow into those roles, and the experience that you can't teach is things they're getting. So just a little bit of silver linings. No, it wasn't good at all, but things to help us move towards the future. As far as the defensive backs, I'm giving them a B. 2 interceptions, only allowing about 120 yards. I think it was actually less passing. Did some decent things and some bad things in run support, but with 2 interceptions, including one that set up the game winner and a pick 6, I've got to give them a B. Do knock them for some of the other things. Trevez Johnson came up with a good pick. Ball was overthrown, came straight to him, but he got under it, made sure he secured it. However, late on one of the last drives, did not play a coverage real well, and it allowed on a 3rd and 10 for the defender or the offense to pick up 20 yards. So a bit of a mixed bag, but I'm giving more positive than negative to our defensive backs, and that's why I ended up with a B. Finally, I want to take a look at the coaching staff and some things I saw and I have questions about from listening to pressers, from what I see on the film, and also just some of the game management things that happened on Saturday night. I know this coaching staff is in their first year. However, that does not make them immune to critique or immune to questions about some things that are not so great, just like they can be praised for things that are good. Truth be told, this offensive coaching staff needs to figure out what they want to do with Anthony Richardson. In the game against USF, he had 6 carries. I know the stats say he had 7 carries, but trust me, I went and counted it, and one of his carries was actually a Naquon Wright carry up the middle. This was after he scrambled for a first down on one of our touchdown drives. He scrambles for a first down. Naquon Wright gets the ball, loses a yard. Then on the next play is when Richardson runs out of bounds for the quote-unquote sack. With that said, 4 of his 6 carries were scrambles, meaning we only gave him 2 real carries. I think I only saw 2 possible read options rewatching the game. I could be wrong. Maybe there was a few that I didn't think were read options that were, but again, just the way he turns hands off doesn't really sell the fake, tells me those weren't really options going on. But Nape also had comments today in his press conference that the QB situation at Florida right now is kind of limiting their play calling as it comes to Richardson's legs. Again, Richardson's legs add a new dynamic that a defense has to cover, and it's just one more thing for them to look out for, and one more thing that can stress and possibly break a defense. Taking that away makes it easier for opposing defenses to stop us, especially when there's some struggles in the passing game. Speaking of the passing game, I'm curious to see why after such success against Utah, we don't see as many flood type routes. For those of you that don't know, that's when you see several levels of receivers all going like right to left to right, and you've got a lower level, which is a shallow cross, and then you've got like an in route and maybe a deep post or a deep in route behind them. Just different things where your eyes don't have to move everywhere on the field, and you can read, okay, which level's open, if anything, and then take off after that. So I'm curious to see why I didn't see too many of those. And Jordan Rogers actually made a similar comment I recognized on one of my last watches of the broadcast. And another deal with the offensive play calling is a majority of the outside plays seem to be called to the short side of the field, such as both of the jet sweeps to Henderson, much less the choice to go with Henderson for the jet sweeps and not a faster player like Pearsall. Again, nothing against Hendo, but when you want to run plays in space, A, probably better to have the faster playmaker, and B, putting them in the side that has the most room. We only saw one outside handoff that went to the long side of the field in this game, and it was Naquon Wright'S touchdown where he had all the room to outpace the USF defender to the end zone. If that was to the short side, there is a chance that the other defenders catch up and he can't quite cut in and get that. Also with the rollouts, there were rollouts to the short side of the field. Rollouts are meant to give the quarterback more of an option to run if he needs to. Well, the short side of the field, as we've talked about in other episodes, brings in the 12th defender of the sideline. That also limits the amount of space that receivers have to run on that side to get open, and it limits the amount of the quarterback's ability to run, and all those things working in conjunction limit the opportunity for this offense. I said it last week. There are reasons why you would go to the short side of the field, but the fact that we did it on probably 90% of our outside plays, including both jet sweeps, is something to ask questions about, quite frankly. On defense, I would ask why we're playing off coverage, towards the end when we had shown that Bohannon could not make those tight throws when we had tight windows. But instead, we were playing 5-6 yards off the guys, and they're just running short routes, catching, running, 2-3 yak, getting out of bounds. I don't know what that is, but to me, that's a question when our guys have shown decent man-to-man skills, especially guys like Kimber and Marshall and Devin Moore. One last question I have is really about the timeout usage at the end of the game. When USF has a bad snap, just loses a bunch of yards, we called a timeout almost immediately. Why would we do that? They had one timeout left. There's about 34 seconds left. Make them try and rush and run another play while they're thinking about this bad play that just happened. And worst case, they take the timeout, or they start to get lined up and then we take the timeout. But you know what you've done? You've just run off more seconds from the clock that is time USF did not have. Also, when you get that stop and it's inbounds, why call the quick timeout before the field goal with the running clock? Force their kicker to run out there and then try to do everything quickly. It could cause a mistake. If not, we're trying to play the odds that they have a bad snap, which they did, bad hold, which they did, and that's not going to happen too much. That's giving yourself too small margin of error, where chances are if they're rushing, they've got a better chance at making mistakes there. I don't want to think that we're trying to play either for overtime or to get the ball with 20 seconds left, because if you're trying to play to get the ball back, you probably should have called the timeouts earlier. And also with the way the passing game was going at that point, I don't know if that's what I would trust either. So I don't know about those timeouts. I personally wouldn't have taken them. I would have forced USF to use their last timeout, or to have to rush and play quickly and possibly make a mistake, or taking the timeout right before they would have run the play. That way you've given them less time, and with the less time also brings a different kind of pressure. With all that said, Saturday night is behind us. Not really an acceptable game, but a win is a win, and hopefully that's the last time we'll have to say that about one of these overmatched opponents. Now, just a few questions before we get out of here. The first one is from Will from New Mexico. He asks, are there other Gator podcasts that you listen to? And I need to say that I do not listen to other Gator podcasts before I record. I don't want to steal what someone else has or openly disagree, but I do listen afterwards. Some podcasts I listen to, of course, Gators Breakdown. I do listen to Respect Our Decision. Getting Swamped is another one that I listen to. I listen to Gator Nation Football Podcast. I'm sure I'm missing someone, but those are definitely ones that I listen to. And another one that we got in today is actually sent to my wife from a coworker and listener of hers. Are you still going to Tennessee? Yes. No matter how good we look, how bad we look, I'm still going to support my team if I've had plans to do so. I traveled to Atlanta in 2015, in 2016, and in 2020. First times I had opportunities to go. None of those times were we expected to win. Heck, I told a story last week about going to the 2004 FSU game, a game we weren't expected to win, and there being good results. Those are almost always the best. We'll take a look at Tennessee and break down how that game is coming up later this week. But the short answer is yes, still going to Tennessee. If you're going to be there, definitely feel free to reach out to us. I'd like to meet up, say hi. Got to meet up and say hi to Gator Josh 01 on Twitter. Gator Josh was a nice guy. Met with him this week before the game. Sat down and talked to him a little bit before kickoff. Very cool guy. If you don't follow him on Twitter, definitely give him a follow. With that said, thank you everyone for listening, and please continue to help us grow. Share this podcast with friends. This is definitely going to be a roller coaster season, but thank you everyone for taking the time to listen. And as always, go Gators.